Good morning, brothers and sisters. So we will read Psalm 31, and we have Pastor HK with us. So praise God that before I slept, I received a message. If I only realized it this morning, I need to lead the morning devotion, I would be very scared, I worried. But in this Psalm 31, I've got two verses which are my favorites. For example, verse 5. Into your hands I commit my spirit. And actually, this is the prayer of Jesus when he was on the cross. And also in verse 15, my times are in your hands. So these are my two favorite verses throughout my life of prayer. So that's why, once I realized that I need to share this passage of Psalm 31, I was very relieved because this is one of my favorite passages. But this morning, when I prepared it, and God gave me some feelings. In verse 5, into your hands I commit my spirit. So how do I comprehend this verse that it is not only a prayer of Jesus on the cross, but we have to understand, it is the prayer of Jesus throughout his life. Especially in the Passion Week, the last week before he went up to the cross. How did he turn this verse into his prayer? So this is the Psalm of David. And God reminded me that I do not need to talk too much about the background, the context of this psalm. Even though it is very important to understand the situation of David in order to understand this passage. But God reminded me that I should understand more of the situation of Jesus in order to understand this psalm better. So that's why today we are not going to talk too much about the context of David in a sense. Because this psalm is a psalm of Jesus. When we come to the last verse, the verse 24. Be strong and take heart, all you who hope in the Lord. When Jesus experienced all his sufferings, and he asks us not to lose hope, and this is his experience. So throughout his experience and the different situations, he surrendered himself to God. Because he knows that it is not a political crime. And he also understands that it is not only because of the hatred of the Jews towards him. And he also understands that it is not because of the innocence of the Jews in the Jerusalem. But instead, he told the disciples that you need to take heart and be strong. So throughout the experience, throughout the process, I surrender myself to my Father. So when you see what's been happening to my life, so don't lose hope, don't retreat, don't disappoint. And instead, you need to keep surrendering yourselves to the Lord and let God strengthen your heart and be strong and take heart. And I believe that this psalm I believe that a lot of people, a lot of Christians will pray with this psalm, especially at the beginning of the church history, when they face a lot of persecutions. So actually, we do not need to fight for our own righteousness before those people, before those wicked people, before those unrighteous people. Because why? Since they were unrighteous anyways, how can we fight for our own righteousness? So what about we surrender our lives to the Lord instead? So throughout our life processes, throughout the different stages of our lives, we entrust our lives into the Lord. So that's why the topic of today is that we take refuge in the Lord for the rest of our lives. There will be 5 little paragraphs. The first, trust, that is in verse 1 to 4. Verse 1 to 4. So he surrendered his cries into God's refuge. He surrendered his cries into God's refuge. So we cry upon the Lord. So we cry upon God's refuge. We believe that God will take care of us and protect us. What was he crying about? He was crying that God, Lord, into your hands I commit my spirit. And this is the difference. And when David prayed to the Lord, he asked God to protect him. But for Jesus, when he cried out for help, he cried out to the Abba Father, and he commits his spirit to the Lord. Because throughout his life, he's been experiencing the love of his Abba Father. And there's the intimate relationship that he could believe, that he could trust his Father. So that's why he could commit his spirit in the Lord. So that's why in the verse 1 he say, in you, O Lord, I have taken refuge. So Jesus cried out that, my Father, I have taken my refuge in you. So please deliver me in your righteousness. So Jesus surrendered his life into God's righteousness. He did not surrender his life to someone else. And in verse 2, turn your ear to me, come quickly to my rescue, be my rock of refuge, a strong fortress to save me. Actually, it's very desperate. Because when the dangers come, we are out of our wits. We are at the end of our wits. So that's why, in the same way, and Jesus cried out to his Abba Father, Lord, please come quickly to my rescue, because you are my rock of refuge, because you are my strong fortress, because you are my rock, you are my fortress, you are my cover, and you are my, in verse 3, you are my rock, you are my fortress, you are my salvation. So actually, all these pictures are the pictures of the time of David. Because for Jesus, he would not run into the rock, he would not run into the fortress. He did not go to the rock or the fortress. That's not the picture in the mind of Jesus. And he said, for the sake of your name, lead and guide me, because you are my Father. So in verse 4, so please free me from the trap that is for me, for you are my refuge. Because Jesus knew that a lot of men have set the trap for him. He knows that the Jews were setting the trap to capture him. To catch him, because the Jews were trying every possible ways to catch him. And also a lot of people around him betrayed him. And Jesus knew that all these are the hidden traps for him. Actually, Jesus loved Judah as well. He loved Judah just like he loved the other disciples. But what saddens us the most is that we were betrayed by our intimate people, by our close friends. So these were the hidden traps for Jesus. But Jesus just cried out to the Lord instead. Lord, into your hands I commit my spirit. And also from verse 5 to verse 13. So he surrendered all his distress into God's faithfulness. And all these are the quick problems. All these are the sudden problems. And he said, into your hands I commit my spirit. When we read the book of Luke, and we know that this is the last prayer of Jesus. So when he was on the cross, he promised to the thief on his side, so today you are with me in the paradise. And then suddenly the heaven and earth became dark. And then suddenly the curtain in the temple just was divided into two. And then he cried and said, Lord, I commit my spirit into your hands. But when we read Psalm 31 today, I realized that Jesus did not really cry out this psalm only at that very moment. Because actually, throughout the different stages of his life, he's been praying like this to the Lord. It is not only a one-time prayer. He has been praying like this continuously because he has been committing his life to the Lord continuously. So in verse 5, redeem me, O Lord, the God of truth. Actually, throughout the lives of Jesus, he's been experiencing the faithfulness of his Father. And he could run, he could walk in front of all those people who set the traps before him, but he was still protected by the Lord. And in verse 6, I hate those who cling to worthless idols. I trust in the Lord. We should not believe in any man-made religion. And he said, I trust in the Lord. Actually, in verse 6, the first part, I hate those who cling to the worthless idols. The worthless idols refers to those priests in the times of Romans. And Jesus said, I will not surrender my life to all those people who only cling to the worthless idols. Even though all those priests worship God in a sense, okay, but deep down their lives, actually, they were worshiping the idols. Don't ever think that for those people of the Judaism believe Jesus truly. Don't really believe that those people who claim themselves the Christians, that they really trust themselves in the Lord. Actually, under all these names, well, there are different kinds of people. There are different kinds of Christians. We need to know who we are believing in, who we are trusting in. But for Jesus, he believed us throughout the process, and Abba Father will listen to his cry, and Abba Father will listen to his prayer. So that's why Jesus would not listen to all those worthless idols. Because, Lord, I trust in you. Because why? Because you know my heart. Because you've been strengthening my faith. So in the same way, brothers and sisters, do you believe that God knows all our sufferings and knows all our experiences? Do you believe that God knows everything has been happening into our lives? Even for the saddest part, even for the most difficult parts of our lives, and our Abba Father knows. So that's why our Abba Father could love us in a very, very intimate way. But sometimes, somehow, when we cannot face the difficult times, we might try to forget it. But I tell you, our Abba Father will not forget our tough experiences. And He will not give us to the enemies. And God said in verse 8, you have not handed me over to the enemy, but have set my feet in a spacious place. I remember the last week of Jesus, even though outside a lot of people were chasing after Jesus. So I guess for the ordinary people, you might have a lot of fear in your heart. You might be hiding yourself. You might have a lot of psychological barriers. But instead, Jesus said, I am setting my feet in a spacious place. And instead, Jesus was washing the feet of the disciples and he was speaking to them. And you know that I was going to prepare the place for you. Because if I was not going, I could not do anything for you. I could not help you if I was not going. And don't worry, and instead I will send another counselor to you. And the spirits of Jesus, the spirits of Christ will be dwelling into your lives. And the spirits of Jesus will be guiding you, will be leading you. And Jesus was telling them that you are going to be the true vine. And I'm going to be the true vine. And you are the branches in me. So that's why you do not need to fear. When you are always in my love, then my love will be always with you. And Jesus even prayed for the disciples. So we can tell that Jesus was not afraid and Jesus was not retreating. And instead, in the last week before he went up to the cross, he spent a lot of time with the disciples. He was trying to strengthen the faith of the disciples at the expense of his own dangers. Because why? He had this trust in the Lord. He surrendered his soul. He surrendered his life in the Lord. And we can see that Jesus was not victimizing himself. He was not fear. He was not afraid. In his heart, he trusts himself to the Lord. And he knows that, and actually, he sets his feet in a spacious place. So that's why he is free to walk around Jerusalem. And he's willing to give himself to the man in the Jerusalem. Because why? Because he knows that his Abba Father is his fortress, is his rock, and is his help. So even though he's in this difficult situation, he could surrender himself. He could commit his spirit, his soul to the Lord. And in verse 9, we are told that Jesus was in distress. It was his actual experience. And his soul and his body was with grief. And actually, he needs to be very careful at that time because he was in danger. And his life was consumed by anguish and his ears by groaning. And his strength failed because of his affliction and his bones grow weak. But he know that God, Abba Father, would take up all these sufferings for him. And he said his bones grow weak because of the iniquities and the transgressions of man. And that's why all his strength was sapped. And also because of all the enemies and the utter contempt of my neighbors. A lot of people would like to insult Jesus. And a lot of people would like to set a lot of traps to threaten Jesus. Be the Jews, be the seducers, or maybe be the Roman kings. All these kinds of people were trying every possible ways to insult Jesus, to bring contempt to Jesus. Actually, at that moment, even the people who've been following Jesus were trying to avoid Jesus, fleeing from Jesus. Even the disciples, and even the disciples were only looking at Jesus in the distance, and they dared not to get close to Jesus. So for those people who knew Jesus, were very fearful, were very scared of seeing Jesus in a close distance. And Jesus became a threat to all those people. So for all those people, when they were questioned by the people, are you the one to know Jesus, the Nazareth? And all those people just evading the questions, just running away from all these questions. So we can recall that when Jesus was hit, was beaten up, when Jesus was beaten, was spat on his face. But at that very moment, not a single of his disciples dared to go closer to the Lord. He heard a lot of rumors. He heard a lot of false witnesses against him. And a lot of people were threatening him with words. And a lot of people were plotting against Jesus. And a lot of people were conspiring against Jesus. Even the high priest was plotting against him. But instead, Jesus was very calm. And instead, Jesus was praying instead. And Jesus praying and surrender and committing his spirits to the Lord. Even though he was insulted, even though he was broken into pieces, even though a lot of people were conspiring against him, were plotting against him, he still prayed to the Lord. Verse 14 to 18. He surrendered his death into the love of Abba Father. But I trust in you, O Lord. I say, you are my God. Verse 14. Because you are my God. You are my Abba Father. Even though the people have been attacking me, even though the people has been setting traps against me, but Lord, you are still my Father. So I still trust in you. And in verse 15, my times are in your hands, and deliver me from my enemies, from those who pursue me. Verse 15. So for my times, it's not only talking about how Jesus is suffering from death. But brothers and sisters, when we need to pray for our whole lives, usually we will think of our ending of our lives. But for Jesus, he did not think in that way. He was thinking of his resurrection as well. He did not only think of his death, he was also thinking about his resurrection in the Lord. He was also thinking about his protection in the Lord and in the Lord. Even though one day he will be leaving this world, but he knows that at the same time he was resting in the Lord. So God said, and Jesus said, I surrender all these things into the Lord. Because Abba Father would deliver him from the enemies and from those who pursue him. Even though he knew that he would be going into death, but he prayed to Abba Father that, let your face shine on your servant. Save me in your unfailing love. So, and let me not be put to shame, O Lord. Verse 17. Because I have cried out to you. So, because throughout the different stages of suffering, I've been praying to you like this. including when I was crucified on the cross, even though that was the very shameful moments of time, I still pray to you. So Lord, please let the wicked be put to shame and lie silent in the grave. Verse 17. Even though all those people has been crying aloud, crucify him, crucify him, crucify him. Even though all those people have been crying that, Jesus, blasphemy, Jesus, blasphemy. But Lord, today, I really pray that you let all those wicked people be put to shame and you silence them. And in verse 18, let the lying lips be silenced, for with pride and contempt they speak all arrogantly against the righteous. He knows that at the very end, in the Hades, all those lying lips against Jesus would be silenced. Because all those lying lips, all those people who were very arrogant would be silenced violently. So can you see that Jesus surrendered his death into the loving kindness of Abba Father? Because he believed that by the loving kindness of Abba Father, he would be saved. So we come to the last paragraph. So Jesus will surrender his life into the kindness of Abba Father. In verse 19, how great is your goodness, which you have stored up for those who fear you, which you bestow in the sight of men on those who take refuge in you. Because God has bestowed the grace and goodness to Jesus already. So that's why he did not need to seek the vindication in the eyes of men. And in verse 20, and in the shelter of your presence you hide them from the intrigues of men. And in the shelter of your presence. And the shelter of the presence is the resting place of our Jesus. So Jesus is hiding in the shelter of God's presence. And that's why he is hiding. He is hiding from the intrigues of men. And all this conspiracy of men against him will be gone. Because Jesus is in the shelter of God's presence. He is in the shelter of God's protection. He is in the dwelling of God's help. So there's no more accusing tongues. There's no more intrigues of men. So he's been surrendering his life to the Lord throughout the different stages of experience. In each single experience, he commits himself to the Lord. Even at the very end of his life, he still commits his life to the Lord. Even when he faced the unrighteous judgment of man, he still commits himself to the Lord. He still believed that his Abba Father is trustworthy. And he still believed his Abba Father's righteousness would save him. So that's why he said, "Oh, Abba Father, I commit my spirit into your hands, and my times are in your hands, because you will protect me." And in verse 21, praise be to the Lord, for he showed his wonderful love to me when I was in a besieged city. Verse 21. Because in God's presence, it is like a very strong tower. No more difficulties will come to you. And God will show his wonderful love to you. And instead, our Jesus was resurrected from death. When we are in death, we are helpless. Well, we do not know how we could come back to life. We do not know what our Abba Father would do to help us. And we do not know how God, our Abba Father, to help us. So for us, for human beings, and sometimes, somehow, if we do not go into death, we do not know how to trust in the Lord. Only when we come only when we come very near to the death, then we know how we should cry out to the Lord. Only by then that we understand the love of God in our lives. Oh, Abba Father, how come I'm cut off from your sight? Yet, and my faith is like that. So when I cried upon you, when I cry upon you, you still hear my cry for mercy. In verse 22, when I'm near the death, that you still listen to my cry for mercy. So when I'm in the rest, when I'm resting in you, you still hear my cry for mercy. And when we come to the last two verses, and Jesus is speaking all these words to his disciples to strengthen their faith. And Jesus said, you take heart, you need to strengthen your faith to love God. You need to take heart, strengthen your faith and love God. Even though you might encounter the difficulties and a lot of problems, you take heart and be strong. You still love God. Even when you come to the times of darkness, of innocence, you still need to love God. You still need to take heart and be strong. Each single disciple, you need to take heart and be strong. Because our Lord is trustworthy. Yes, it's true, we can commit our spirits into the hands of our Abba Father. Especially, and it say in verse 23, the Lord preserves the faithful, but the proud he pays back in full. What does it mean by the faithful? The people who's been putting their faith in the Lord continuously. That is called the faithful. That is called the faithful. That is the people who puts their faith and trust in the faithfulness of God. Even when we come to the death, we still put our faith in the Lord. Because why? Because we believe that all our times in our lives are in the hands of the Lord.